Good afternoon, listeners. Thank you all for joining and welcome to the first inaugural Winner's Circle podcast. Today, I have a very special guest that I'm going to be interviewing today. He's a longtime friend and acquaintance. He's Lebanese and his name is Karim Jazzar. Karim brings over 15 years working in the HR industry with experience working for companies like CMA CGM as the head of regional HR, focusing on developing global policies, as well as focusing on talent management, employee engagement, diversity, and inclusion. Karim was also the learning and development manager at CMA CGM Group and developed the L&D frameworks there and overseeing a lot of various different projects. Today, Karim is going to share with you his story and his journey, some success stories, some winning strategies, and some insight that's going to motivate and inspire you. Stick around, and I'm super excited to share with you my first podcast. Let's do this. Karim, welcome to the Winner's Circle. How are you today?
Thank you for having me, Samer. That makes me look really good, I must say. Happy to be here. Thanks for the invite. I'm really excited to do this podcast with you and hopefully to add a bit of value and knowledge to some of your listeners. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Really, I really appreciate it, Anjad. And yeah, so, I think for this conversation, a lot of our audience and what we discuss too is really just, again, sharing your story. And, to me, we've known each other for a while. I moved here around 4 years ago and, I became part of the Beirut Digital District ecosystem, and that's kind of how we met. So, yeah, I guess let's start with
Sure.
Tell us what you have going on. Tell us what you're working on, and we'd love to hear it then.
Sure. Yeah, Samer, I remember, when we first met, we clicked quite directly. We had a lot in common. Back in the day, you were still setting up eFlow, which maybe we'll talk about a bit later. For me, I'm focusing on a lot of different things. In terms of career, things are going well. Getting to that 15-year plus mark, which basically within HR is always a pivotal moment. And for me, focusing on the job right now that I started a couple of months ago, it's really about, taking everything I've learned throughout my career, in Beirut, in the Netherlands, working with, multinationals, exposure to different nationalities and all of that, and really putting that all into play. So to answer it simply, my main focus right now is really understanding, HR transformation and everything that entails. It's a very complex process within organizations. Today HR is going through, it goes in cycles, right? There are different versions of HR depending on the context, depending on what's going on in the world, depending on priorities, depending on technological shifts. So for me, it's really focusing on that part because especially in the MENA region, when you look at what's going on, in the UAE, in Saudi, I think there's a lot of investment and increased awareness about the importance of HR embedded within business strategy. So that's my focus today.
Absolutely, that's really amazing, Karim. And as far as when you look at kind of corporate structure and companies, we're talking. This is a people business, right? We're talking relationships, we're talking HR transformation, and that's we hear a lot of words like that: digital transformation, HR transformation.
It's a lot of buzzwords, right?
Exactly. But if you could maybe like take that up just to 30,000 level view, tell me what is that? What's an example of a maybe HR transformation effort? What's something that maybe you've actually been a part of? I'm interested to see.
The first part is always creating a shared understanding of what HR is. If you look at what goes on in the world today, everyone says, companies grow, they have challenges. The challenges, the growth impacts, infrastructure, processes, it impacts strategy, and it impacts people, right? So you need to break it down in a way that it makes sense. It's not a one-size-fits-all type of model that you can go into a company and say, hey, we're going to do an HR transformation, it's going to happen in 3 months. You'd be shooting yourself in the foot, right? So when you unpack the whole thing, it's about careful planning. It's about creating a framework that makes sense for the organization. And it's about articulating with your stakeholders, your board, your executive committee, your management committee, whoever, in aligning on a future state. HR today is at the top in terms of priorities across the board, across geographies.
Sure.
You may be in tech, in retail, in construction, in shipping. So today it's the ability to engage with the top management to create that 3 to 5 year vision. And there are ways today, if you're an HR professional or an L&D professional, a lot of levers or a lot of functional pillars are there. You look at case studies, you look at best practice, you look at what the consultants say. I'll have a word on consultants later on during the podcast, but the ingredients are there. You win if you're able to connect all of the dots in an engaging way and where you highlight, you showcase the value that it can bring to an organization, and you need to have the team to do it. Yeah, you cannot make miracles if you don't have the right mindset, the right attitude, the right team. The key here is to clarify, to distill that vision of what HR is supposed to do,
sure,
how it's going to get the company to where it wants to get, by impacting people, processes, look at your operational requirements, and be there to build the strategic priorities and to help the company achieve its future goals. So that's, the way I approach it in the past and still today, obviously.
Very interesting, very interesting. And Karim, you mentioned a good point. Is like it's not so much just building like a good work environment. Obviously, it's a big part of it. Like, hey, a happy workplace, happy. We have the ping pong table. We have that. It's a much bigger. It seems like initiative and feat really at this point. So, I think too, and even not even just in the corporate sense, right? We have these large established Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 1000. International companies that may be based in Saudi or in the MENA that are dealing with things like culture and things like that, right? So with employees, but no, I think it's very interesting. But Karim, tell me, maybe is there a specific trend that you're seeing now in HR that we're in 2024 now? I mean, you've been in this industry now for quite some time, over 15 years. You've worked with different companies. What are you seeing? I mean, are you seeing a positive? Do you see something like really good happening? I mean, do you see a lot of companies are going down in the fact of pushing these initiatives? I mean, we see a lot of people leaving companies. You see these stories of, these shutdown. I mean, the way people are being treated, let's say in KSA. So I'd love to get your insight into that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, Samer. I mean, you touched upon culture, employee engagement, employee experience.
Yeah.
These are, for a lot of companies or a lot of executives, these are either initiatives, you mentioned the ping pong table or the couches or
sure,
whatever. But if you want it to be meaningful at the end of the day, you need to position it as an outcome of a lot of things you need to do internally as an organization. So that's the first, key takeaway. Employee engagement is not just a survey. It's a mindset you need to instill. But you need to take into account the generational shifts. I mean, our generation functions in a significantly different manner than 1 or 2 generations prior to us. The notion of career today has shifted fundamentally.
Sure.
It was common for people to stay 20, 30, 40 years in the same company and do it proudly. And, I'm not criticizing
sure,
that. But today, our generation, millennials, the Gen Zs, all of that coming into the workplace expect something very different. They want to work, they want to make friends, they want to have a social life in the workplace, they want a promotion every 6 months,
sure,
they want a raise every day. So you are dealing with a very different, workforce. There are some similarities across cultures, across geographies. You mentioned KSA or the MENA,
yeah,
or even here in Lebanon. There is a shared, let's say, will for this generation to move fast. The older generations look at it and say, hey, they're not patient, they want this too fast, it needs timing. And there is some truth to that at the end of the day. But you look at a lot of the reports, I should send you one of the very interesting findings. I think it was a report by McKinsey about what motivates different generations within an organization. And you see the differences there. But one thing is for sure, anyone who wants to build strategic HR capabilities focuses today on talent management. Talent management today is the make or break. Regardless of the industry, hiring good people today is much more challenging than it was a few years ago.
Absolutely. That's really great. And Karim, and going off that token is, we talk about people and kind of the direction that you went in your career. I mean, you've obviously lived mostly in this general region for quite some time. You know the area. You're from Lebanon. You're Lebanese. I guess when we graduate university, and maybe our listeners out there are trying to choose a career path, right? And maybe trying to follow in HR, right? Like I have a friend, she's very dedicated about that. There's a lot of credentials you can get in HR. There's a lot of different courses you can take. But, I guess what was the thing that triggered you? Was it something that you fell into versus something maybe you were pushed, I guess you were lured to it because that's something that attracted you. So, that's what I'm interested about.
Yeah, sure.
There's no straight line in a career, right? So I'm interested to see how you went from there. So
I would say there isn't a line at all. I mean, for me, it was a series of happy accidents, as I call them. Personally, I would have never thought I'd be working in HR, to be very honest with you. I think, my background is in economics, I know master's in management. I think if I had to give, advice to people graduating, it's always a crucial period when you're graduating and what the hell am I going to do with my life now? Where do I go? So either you have a family support system where your father or your brother or your siblings did a certain career, you tend to follow in their steps because, they've been there, they've done that, they know the highs and the lows.
Exactly.
But the first job is rarely one that you're going to say, okay, this is my career for the rest of my life. Now, what's important, I want to add a bit of nuance here. It's about finding what works for you. Mm-hmm. Now, what worked for me when I graduated, I worked in higher education, specifically in executive education, and I found out that for me, a main motivator is helping people. Mm-hmm. So during my 10 years in higher education, I had maybe close to 1,000 executives coming in, programs I ran, sure. MBAs, executive masters, investing in themselves, right?
And Karim, so just to understand, you had studied at this university, and then you became part of the team, right?
Yeah,
so how did that shift happen? It seems it must have been a positive experience.
When it happened, I think I was interviewing for banking. I'm not very good at writing Arabic, so I remember it was AJBL. I went to, they had admissions test. It was all in Arabic.
This was a requirement at the time.
Yeah, but I don't read or write Arabic. Wow. I do, but maybe like an 8-year-old, So
wow.
So that after the cold sweats and the crying that evening, and getting myself is saying it's okay. I went shopping, internships, whatever I could find. And, the call came. They said, hey, we're looking for a program manager. Would you be interested? I didn't really have any other options. Sure. I said yes. And then I went into that, industry, which is a very 360 industry in terms of the skills you develop. The main skill I developed early on is communication. And maybe we'll touch upon how important that skill is for, let's say, for the younger listeners who are listening to the podcast. But at the end of the day, it's finding what you do best and what you like. And what I do best and what I like is being in a position where I can help people reach their potential.
Sure.
In education, people come, they invest in themselves, they do an MBA and executive masters, and you are the manager or the director of their program. So you're part of their learning journey. And it's really rewarding when they graduate, they give you a call or send you an email, hey, I got this promotion, I moved to London, I moved to Singapore, sure. I got this great gig, it's all thanks to the program, thank you. Because you develop listening skills, you develop mentorship, you develop coaching, and that for me has been a very valuable thing during the first phase of my career. So it was an accident, but somehow it worked for me in my personality type, in the way I like to approach things, in the way I like to approach life. And in essence, it was a natural transition then to go towards learning and development and HR, because in essence, what is HR? Today they brand it as human capital.
I follow that path.
Great. So, but the essence is the same. You need to make sure that the people you have in your organization are equipped in terms of technical skills, soft skills, attitude, behaviors to do the best job that they can do to help the company perform at its best level.
Exactly. And that's really interesting, Karim, because unfortunately a lot of people, they don't find kind of that why early in their career. It sounds like you kind of figured out like, hey, I like helping people, I like doing this. You tried it and then it worked out for you. So that's really great. And I think too, obviously we all come from different backgrounds. We have, different status in, society, whether it's, having privilege or, whatever that may be, or even just having someone that's maybe a mentor in your life, or someone that is like a positive force that maybe kind of has been your guiding force. Do you have someone like that? I'm just curious to know, because for me it was my dad, right? So he always was pushing me, how Lebanese dads are, study, and things. So for me, even in your career, was there someone that maybe was pivotal? It could be a family member as well.
No, obviously there are many people that influence and shape who you are personally and professionally. Obviously, the parents play the most important role in
Sure.
that. My dad taught me about humility, about staying humble, about working hard. I'm the youngest of four, so I have three older siblings, one brother, two sisters. You get some insight from them as
Sure.
well, how they did it, how they succeeded, where they failed. You learn from that. Family is an extremely important system to have in your life, and I know that maybe not everyone has let's say, a strong family or social support system to help them through, let's say, their life, maybe personally or in terms of career. Obviously, when you look at the career, my wife plays a very important role in
Sure.
that. She's always been there to push
Behind
me.
the scenes, you're
Behind
right.
the scenes. I mean, she said yes to moving to Rotterdam in January.
Sure.
So, and she doesn't like the cold, So that
Of course,
it's important to have that support system in your life, because without that you don't get very far. You can't do it on your own, definitely. From a career perspective, I was also fortunate to have key mentors at every stage of my career. When I started at ESA, Stefan Attali, he was a big influence for me. When I moved to Rotterdam, I had Jaap Spronk, who was also a very good influence. And further on, I've always looked at senior people or executives within the companies I went for and tried to learn from them as most as I could. And certain companies, have what we call formal mentorship programs, right?
Sure.
And that is, for me, so important.
Well, they'll match you with a executive.
They match you,
Yeah.
you learn, because a lot of the skills you need to master when you go at executive level has nothing to do with your technical capabilities. It's about how you influence people. It's about how you communicate. It's about how you get the buy-in. And by looking at these people at those types of levels and learning from them and staying close to them and working on projects with them, that is a very, very good way to approach your own personal and leadership development, right?
Absolutely, and even myself is early in my career, and a lot of people, we start our career, maybe we don't have that company structure where we have an executive that's willing to give his time and things like that. So in my case, for example, Karim, I had to kind of like forcibly or kind of be proactive in that measure, right? So, I mean, obviously having these programs is great, but sometimes too, maybe even the listeners, I think too, it's important to like really like, and maybe you can share on that. Like, were you sending like emails to these folks? Like how, like what was the strategy? I'm just curious before we move on, like what's some things you could do to say, can I get 5 minutes?
I would show up in the middle of the night. No, I'm kidding. It's obviously, no, I would wait for them.
Outside his door.
I mean, it's a mix of two things. It's about the attitude, right?
Sure.
So if you like what you're doing, and I understand it's not a given that everyone finds, what they're good at early on or what they need to develop. It's about being there. A lot of people say don't say yes all the time. You need to learn how to say no. But in certain parts of the careers, saying yes systematically puts you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in positions where I say yes, I'll take that
Sure.
on, and I had no clue how to do it. Obviously, that's what YouTube is for, and Google, and all of those things. Today we have ChatGPT. But your mindset needs to constantly push you in a proactive way to go out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely.
The comfort zone is where you go to die, right?
Yeah.
So your ability to go and figure things out on your own will automatically force you to build your network within a startup, within an NGO, within a corporate, or whatever it is. So it's a blend between, taking the jump, engaging with who you believe could potentially be mentorship figures for you,
Sure.
whichever the environment, and try to figure it out.
Understood. No, that's really amazing. And I think that's a perfect segue kind of into our next point, which is, these strategies for success, right? And we talk about this winner's circle, right? And, I mean, we can define winning in so many different ways, right? Winning in your personal life, winning in business, landing a new client. I mean, there's so many things, right? So, I'd like to kind of jump in and we talk about, I recently read a book called The Compound Effect with Darren Hardy. Amazing book. If you guys ever get a chance to read it, go check it out. But it talks about these little micro decisions that we make kind of throughout the day, right? Or maybe it's these little habits or knacks that we do. And obviously, we don't have someone there anymore to kind of hold us accountable. So, we talk about improving ourselves. We're in the new year now, and I mean, how did you get this far? I mean, Karim, I mean, you've gone through a lot. We've faced a lot of challenges here. But what are some things that you do as Karim to get started to the day, or what's some things you could share with us that just help you win?
The most complex thing to do is to keep things simple. You know, people tend to overcomplicate things.
Goals, things like that.
I'm a firm believer of visualization.
Sure.
You know, visualize where you want to go and then kind of reverse engineer how to get there. I have a standard set of routine stuff that I do. I like to do my to-do lists, you know, on a Sunday morning, prepare for the week. Being prepared actually helps manage the stress, because you know you're on top of things. And I don't do my to-do lists on an app or on a fancy thing. I do it on paper, pen and paper. So for me, it also has an impact when I'm actually writing and feeling the paper. Psychologically, it helps me feel in control of things. That works for me. Then in terms of, you know, what I don't do anything special. You know, I'm not one of those TikTok guys where I do a 4 a.m. ice bath and then I meditate for 12 minutes and I do. That doesn't work for me. It may work for other people and I respect that. But for me, it's, you know, getting up. They say don't look at your phone. The first thing I do is look at my phone, check my emails, have a coffee, crawl out of bed. I don't do any stretching or workouts in the morning. But it's about finding a moment before you get into the week, because, you know, when you go into your week, your working week, things will go out of control.
Absolutely.
You will lose your schedule if you are not on top of things. So for me, it's about creating a framework in my mind, and I don't go into the little details. I don't write the tasks I need to do. I write what I need to achieve at this week or this month, and you visualize what that's going to look like, and that helps me find the balance, you know, in my mind, right? Because stress, at the end of the day, 80% is for stuff that probably are not going to happen, right? You learn that in mindfulness. I don't know if you had the opportunity. So a lot of the things you're worrying about are not going to happen or haven't happened yet. So being able to control, let's say, that inner voice and keeping things simple, not overcomplicating things, and obviously not being too hard on yourself as well, right?
Absolutely,
you know, you need to make sure that there's so much you can control, and you need to find an ability to be okay with the things you can't control at the end of the day, maybe personally or professionally or in your career, or there's a big meeting you need to work on, or whatever it is. So it's a lot of different things. And the last point for me, I do things that are very different. You know, I don't read about HR. I don't read a lot of books. I have a few books I've been reading recently, but, you know, I play music. I like to play video games. I like to read science fiction.
It's kind of like diversifying.
Yeah, you know, get your mind off of work, because that's where the big ideas come from, where you're not actively focusing on concentrating on topics that are related to your work, and go a bit to arts and culture and music. You know, that's where inspiration comes from as well.
And you know, you brought up a good point too when you talk about this planning thing that you do, especially before the week or before, you know, this new project, whatever that may be. It's kind of like the same as I'm planning for like a big game ahead, right? Or a big match, right? We're studying the other team. We're doing our kind of like our overview. We wouldn't go into a match without being prepared, right? So I kind of, that's the way I've even looked at it. It sounds like you're almost doing the same thing. It's like you almost have to let fate. You've done everything in your side to prepare, and that's all you can do. You just kind of have to take that leap, right? And whatever happens, happens. So
yeah, exactly. Really, and people are going to go after you. You have people you get along with. You just always need to keep a cool head at the end of the day.
Cool heads prevail. Yeah, that's a big one.
That's the name of our band. The
No
Cool
way.
Heads.
Cool
No,
Heads?
I'm kidding. But it would be a cool name.
I would come to the show for sure. So amazing. So yeah, I mean, again, you know, I think too when we talk about work-life balance too, you mentioned some points on that. And we're all stressed out, right? We have a lot of things going on, not only here in Lebanon, you know, across the world with everything that's going on. So, you know, Karim, other than like this kind of generic, everybody's doing exercise and things like that, you know, what do you deal with when you're in really stressful situations, with whether it's a client, maybe it was back at CMA, CGM, or maybe in your current position, you know, how do you like not react? How do you kind of can take over a meeting? And I think a lot of even our listeners, we get so much crap thrown at us in our plate, and we don't know how to react. And for us, that's where the real champions and the winners rises.
Yeah.
They get in these situations and they can be counted on and they can go for it. So, you know, I'd like to know maybe some insight on that. It's like, what do you do you're just surrounded, man. The daggers are out, and I want to know. That's what we really want to know. So tell me.
I'll be telling all my secrets, Samer.
Yeah,
happy
this is why we're here, right?
I think the word is not the right word to react. I respond. Right, and your ability to count to 10 in your mind, that comes with experience as well, because if you are, as you say, the knives are out, there's a stressful meeting, you got a nasty email, or someone calls you shouting, not very happy, you need to just step out of the situation for a bit in your mind. Now, I'm not saying that I've been cool and calm for the past 15 years. There are moments where you lose control, but when you do lose control, it's going back to that incident or whatever, because it stays in your mind. For a couple of days, for a week, you're thinking about it. I should have done this, I should have done that, or whatever. So it's about training yourself in terms of, okay, if this happens, proactively know how am I going to respond. Now, it's not manipulation, it's not politics or whatever it is, but as we were just saying, your ability to keep a cool head under pressure is a make or break at the end of the day. So you can just smile, say, okay, point taken, whatever, all right, let's try to move on, let's take this offline, let's circle back on it. I'm using all the buzzwords I know, by the way. Circle back to it or whatever it is. But with time, you will learn that a lot of these tension in organizations with people, very little of it is actually personal. And we tend to confuse our personal identity with our professional identity. So if you are able to detach that one from the other, that is a very crucial element that people need to know. So when I go to work, I'm not the Karim that my family knows or my wife knows, whatever. I have a role. It's not about being a hypocrite or wearing a mask, but there are certain roles, there are certain expectations, there are certain behaviors expected from you, and you need to play that role in the best possible way. Especially in HR. I mean, HR is the last function that needs to take decisions based on emotion.
Sure. You kind of have to hold the fort.
You are the one who holds the people together, hold the people together. You need to be a force of calm.
And the example, of course, too.
And be the example. So it adds that extra stress, because obviously there are some times you do want to kind of give it your all and say exactly what you mean and what you want to say. But that comes with time, it comes with practice, it comes with experience. It's about when in 15 years you see a lot, in 30 years you see a lot, even more at the end of the day. So it's about unpacking all of those moments in your career, and next time it happens, because it will happen consistently in your career, to learn from the way you managed it before. And that comes from self-reflection, it comes from introspection, it comes from about thinking about it. But at the same time, you don't want it to be there all the time. You don't want to be operating with all of that baggage in your mind in terms of, I should have done this, or I should have that. So to cut a long story short, it's about not reacting, it's about responding, it's about taking a moment, because sometimes you can misunderstand. When you're dealing with different cultures, different nationalities, they may say something that may seem offensive to, let's say, Lebanese culture or French culture or whatever, but the intent was not there. So I'm reading a lot about this, actually. There's a great book called The Culture Map. I don't know if you read it. Erin Myers, she's an INSEAD professor. She's traveled the world, and she wrote about culture, China, South America, how they give feedback, how they do performance appraisals, their perception to time, relationship to deadlines. It's a fascinating read, because it's about, if you are exposed to multicultural environments, it's a great toolbox that you can learn, very practical. In Japan, for instance, they have a saying in terms of you have to read the room, So when Americans deal with Japanese, the dynamics are fundamentally different in the way they conduct a meeting, in the way they approach a conflict, in the way they think about problem solving, respect.
Absolutely, even eye contact, right?
Eye contact. So all of those things, it's good to expose yourself to this very, very big world of diverse practices, behaviors, concepts, standards. And in HR, it's a fascinating topic. Even if you're in Lebanon or working with a Lebanese company, Lebanon in itself is very diverse, right? There's a lot of regions, a lot of culture, and all of that. So it's about, curiosity.
That's
as well.
Exactly, just kind of that seek for knowledge. So this is great. Karim, I want to know one other thing too is, as we kind of dive a little bit deeper, kind of into your story and what you've kind of been working on, and it's really been amazing so far. And what are some things maybe that you're most proud of? And I actually personally, I don't know if you know this, but I used to work in HR, specifically talent management.
I didn't know that.
I was doing hiring.
Nobody's perfect, Samer. It's fine.
I was basically hiring developers and various different roles for a tech company in the U.S. and I was placing people in jobs. And to me, my biggest success there was finding this sweet young lady, brilliant, talented person, her dream job. To me, I was able to connect her with the recruiter, I interviewed her, I coached her, I mentored her, I got her prepped for the client. And she thanks me even till this day, 10 years later, I still get messages on LinkedIn. So, I changed the trajectory of her life, even though I only played a pivotal role. And as you said, I came to do a job, right? I came to do that. But sometimes these things leak in, right? And it's powerful, right? So is there a specific person or situation or moment that you can share with us where you were just like, wow, man, this makes sense now. This is why I'm doing it. And you talked about some stories, but I'd like to hear something maybe from your side. This is why I'm doing this, man. And then that's part of the winning strategy, right? Because when we're happy and we're helping people and we're fulfilling ourselves, we're winning in that sense. So I'd love to maybe hear an example. And I know it's a little bit maybe off script.
No, sure. I'm just trying to think of a practical example, not to keep things too general. Obviously, whenever you're able to help anyone in their journey, and and the recognition and the thanks you get, it's great. It's not supposed to build up your ego. It's not about you anymore. Your ability to sometimes put yourself on the side and really focus on the challenge at hand. Because people come from all types of situations, backgrounds. I remember specifically early in my career, I had this guy, who came, he enrolled in one of the masters I was handling. It was a master's in finance. I won't say the name because we don't need to. And so this guy was working in a bank, I forgot which bank, and he was so driven to change his situation. He wasn't making money, he was in debt, he had a lot of family issues. He was kind of left alone to fend off for himself. So somehow, he was a candidate. He came. He obviously couldn't pay for the program, and I worked with him. I kind of made an exception in terms of he took a loan from the bank to kind of cover the fees and all of that, and we kind of made it work because I saw that this guy is hungry, right? You can be born and raised with all the opportunities in front of you, and you can be born and raised with nothing.
Sure.
It's not, one is better than the other, because you have people who have everything in life and do nothing with it at the same time, right? But you'll come across people like that who actually inspire you more than you inspire them.
Mm-hmm.
And, he got accepted to the program.
Amazing.
He did the program, one of the brightest, top performers. He wanted to stay in Lebanon, but he was very open to leave Lebanon.
And that's interesting too, Karim, because you hire a lot of people. You talk to a lot of people. You've done a lot of hiring yourself. What are things that you look for? Maybe
Absolutely.
Specifically, key characteristics or things that stick out.
It's about attitude. I'll just get to that. But this guy graduated from the program. We did the graduation ceremony. 3 months later, he gives me a call. He told me, Karim, I moved to London.
You're kidding me.
One of the biggest finance firms in the UK. He's still there today, 10 plus years there. He's made it in life. So, you have stories like this. I'm not saying it's because of, we were there for his journey. We were there to support the journey. And that, as you say, is very fulfilling. It's very rewarding to know that.
As you've trained for that role, this was your job, your responsibility, but again, that had that greater impact,
exactly.
Right?
So that's a story that comes to mind. Now, in terms of what was the second question?
It's about candidates, and when you were talking to people, you saw this guy. Now he's in the UK.
Exactly. For me, it's about attitude. And I've been able to recruit or manage recruitment projects for different types of functions in my career. Obviously, when you look at fresh grads, you look at their journey. Skills can be learned at the end of the day. It's very cliche what I'm going to say, but you can learn skills. You can
Absolutely.
Today, online, there's so many options there for people to upskill. Today, most of the industries are moving away from the traditional CV academic requirements and all of
PhD,
that.
masters.
Okay, these are all very nice, but MBAs were initially invented in the 60s, if you think about it, when engineers didn't know how to manage people. So they said, hey, let's do an MBA to teach these people how to manage people.
Exactly.
MBA today is a very generic brand, right? There's fantastic programs out there, but it's a very risk-averse type.
Maybe even the new bachelor's is what they're saying, right? It's
exactly. So there is a sense of conformity in education, higher education.
Sure.
It needs to evolve. It is aware, coming from the business 10 years in there. But at the end of the day, you look today at competencies. More and more you're looking at competencies. Now, a competency is a mix, obviously, of skill. It's a mix of behavior, of attitude. So it's a more, let's say, 360 view of what a candidate can bring to the table. Now, when I interview people, I always like to talk about, practical stuff.
Sure.
Right? I don't really look into where you studied, how you studied it, what was your GPA.
Like
all of those are important to a certain extent. But when you hire young people, or let's say fresh grads, you're going to have to retrain them from the start, because the university doesn't really equip people to operate in an professional environment. Unfortunately, but we know the gaps are there. I've worked with many universities to do a lot of workshops in terms of
that transition to get into
that transition, which is hard because you've learned a lot of things in a different setting, and now you're going into a corporate world or an environment where fundamentally everything you've learned, you need to put it aside for a while. So the shift there is very complex.
Mm-hmm.
But when I recruit people, I look at that in this situation, what would you have done? Or what would you do to manage this type of situation? When you're interviewing executives or leadership positions, it's always about what's your style, how do you manage people, how do you manage low performers, do you know how to say no? What's the biggest lesson you've learned? What's your biggest failure? For people to speak very practically about these things. When you look at the young to mid, you look at the attitude, and you see, does that fit with our culture?
And where you gonna want to go with the company and bring them with.
Exactly.
Right? So.
Because today's expectation, people want to come in your company, but they want to know in 5 years where they're gonna get, and that's a very complex question to answer.
Absolutely, especially with the market now too, and so much going on, and absolutely. And Karim, getting into that is like when you go into these organizations, what's an ideal environment for you? Like, what do you see as an organization that has done it right? That's what I want to know. Like, is there we're obviously each day this position you're in now or in previous roles, like what is it? Okay, my job done. I've reached this point. This is how we want this organization. Or you talk about processes, you talk about these different things, but what's a winning environment? And once you get that, obviously happy clients, happy people, things like that. But what does that look like in your eyes as someone who, to achieve this within maybe your current role? Tell me a little bit more about.
So from an HR perspective, if you want to build the let's say the ideal environment, right? So we touched upon culture, employee engagement, employee experience, which are outcomes. A lot of people say culture is the values of the company. Partly it's true, but it's not just that. Culture is a mix of a lot of different moving parts. But at the end of the day, an organization, regardless of the size, maybe this would apply more to bigger organization, that has managed to institutionalize succession planning within, that's a company that's winning. An organization that does not have succession plan, so they don't know
could you elaborate on succession planning?
Yeah.
Some people might not understand. I understand what it means. But
exactly. Succession planning is part of talent management. We touched upon this. It's the ability of an organization to define in advance who their future leaders are.
Okay. So kind of the swinging door, right? Where you have the older generation moving out and then handing over.
Sometimes, yes. Okay. But that's what you call the leadership pipeline. Mm-hmm. Because when you ask me, how is it working at X or Y? Culture boils down to two practical things. How do I grow in the company? Do I have learning? Do I have promotions, career development?
Salary raises,
all of that,
like that.
How does that happen? And how do my management behave? Mm-hmm. From toxic to the empowering and everything in between. So an organization, if they want to build the next 5, 10, 15 years, the faster they are able to actively or proactively decide what is the DNA what skills their managers need to have, what their executives need to have in terms of behavior skills. That needs to feed in within the HR strategic framework or talent management. And then, the high potentials in a company and all of that. So now there are programs that, can be developed to actively mold, let's say, the frontline managers, grow them into middle managers,
so put them on that kind of track.
That is succession planning. It's equipping yourself for the future by actively defining what does it take to be a leader in this organization. And that's ultimately how you also build culture, right?
That's really great. And I feel like even with these old, kind of stoic old companies, Fortune 500s, I mean, some of the organization, I mean, you look at maybe even just at a in-office perspective, right? Like, you think they'd have it together by, because they're this huge company, but you get in these scenarios and maybe they're siloed and, we have these departments aren't talking and we run in. What are some challenges you see in the MENA and GCC and these bigger companies that you're running into? I mean, it's a little scary, no?
Well, it's natural. I mean, today, I think in the MENA region, what's really interesting is that there is a full buy-in to, let's say, the strategic HR function.
So they need it. They know they need it.
They know they need
That's
it.
Good
learning and development today. If you look at job openings in Dubai, in Qatar, in Saudi, everyone wants top L&D people at the end of the day. Because there's the realization today, in the post-COVID world as well, that L&D is one of the main levers for companies to change, to transform.
No kidding.
Really.
Wow.
Because what does it do? And this is, part of the research I'm doing as well, is historically, you do your appraisal, right? I don't know if you've had experience doing a performance appraisal,
I have. I used to work for a big company, so I would have them on me.
Yeah, so not the best experience generally. It's one of the hardest things to do. So basically your manager tells you how your year was, you grade, you rate, you put a couple of numbers, and then he puts it in his drawer and you never talk about it ever again. Then they give that to HR, and then HR looks at what training does that person need. So they start to collect Excel, project management, whatever it is, right? You do a very nice PowerPoint, and then goes into the drawer as well.
Sure.
You probably do 10% of what you need to be delivering as training.
Presented and then back to business as usual.
Then, we want to promote people. Based on what? So today, L&D, the trend that is shifting, that is happening right now, is that there is integration between learning, as in training. I don't like the word training, I probably prefer learning, performance management, and what I call potential management.
Potential management.
So when you link these three, it connects the dots in a way where you are providing visibility, a current snapshot of what your current skill set is in the organization. You've identified who are the people who have potential. What is potential at the end of the day? It's the ability of someone to take on more complex roles with time. And there are ways to measure that. I won't elaborate now. I know we will need probably a couple of hours for the podcast.
But when the kitchen gets hot, they can stand the heat, right?
Exactly. And you then tie that into learning. So once you have that ecosystem, that is the engine of talent management. Obviously, you want people to recruit the right people, you want to onboard them in the right way, you want to have them go through the cycle, and the output is you create career pathing. So you know who are the people who are going to grow. Certain people, you need them to be doing consistently for 5 to 10 years the same job. You need them there, so you can look at lateral growth, for instance. And then that goes into what we call total rewards, eventually, your salary, your package, your benefits, how that all evolves.
So that constant reskilling, that providing, giving them the tools, like, hey, this is what you need to learn. This is how you get to the next step, right? Yeah. Giving them that. Maybe it's that course, right? Maybe it's a Toastmasters for their public speaking, right? Or whatever it may be.
It could be a lot of different initiatives. It depends on the industry, it depends on the organization, on the country, whatever it is. But this is today the discussions that are happening. How do we properly frame this interaction within the organization to be able to have visibility on how your people are going to evolve, right? And that is one of the most complex issues today in the HR world.
Got it. And that's interesting because it's all kind of connected, right? Because we talk about longevity at a company, we talk about why people leave companies, managers, they feel stuck. Maybe it's not just the salary, right? They're not seeing any growth opportunities, right? So again, how do you keep a team? How do you consistently, again, upgrade them, update them, improve them so they can become, again, these kind of leaders in your company. So yeah, I think this is really great, Karim, as far as where this is going. And do you see, as far as like consulting companies and HR consulting companies, like what's the formula here? Is it companies should just hire really talented, like someone like you, bring them in the organization? Does the outsourcing model work? With outsourced HR professionals where they come in and do that consulting? Tell me that, and then we can just kind of get to the conclusion here.
Sure.
Towards the end.
It depends on the maturity of the organization. Obviously,
Yeah.
if you're starting off and you need to look at some best practice, how to do it, what are the frameworks, it's good to engage with consultancies.
Sure.
They know what they're doing.
They've been there, done that.
They've been there, they've done that. They can kind of shed light and perspective on the model that could potentially work for you. But with time, you cannot sustain, paying,
Not having it
because
internally.
consultants cost a lot of money at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely.
So if you have the hunger for that as an organization, your interest is to build internal capabilities. So you start off obviously with external advisors, external consultancies, specialize in HR transformation, how to build a talent management framework. And then you need to start to build the roadmap internally on who are the people, who is the team who's going to make that a sustainable, let's say, energy that will have impact on the organization and the people. So
Sure.
It's a blend. It depends on a lot of different things. For me, that would be my recommendation, definitely.
Got it. And the last thing is, what is there a certain mindset, or like, for example, we talk about leadership and the CEO and the board members and the whole organization, right? Is there a certain thing that a company or individuals can do that make these things successful? That's what I'm trying to is it communication? Is it just obviously being all on the same page? I don't that's why I'm trying to understand what to me is generally a factor you see that becomes, okay, this is going to work here because they're doing this, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm interested in seeing.
Communication for me is the most important thing. So communication, when I manage my team, right? When I join a company, or if there's an assignment or a project, it's about being consistent in your ingredients, in the way you want to do things. Now, the way I do things, I have three very fundamental that I do not change at all. I delegate. I don't go into micro details. I don't go into operations, because that gives opportunity for the team to come up with ideas, actions, recommendations, and for
don't
them.
get in the way when.
No. You give them the freedom, you give them the guidance, but it's up to them to do the job. I don't manage HR. I manage the people who manage HR at the end of the day. That's first. 2, trust. Building trust, shaping the team as a high performance team takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time. You're dealing with different personalities, different ages, different moods, men, women, there's a lot of things that go into that. That takes a lot of time as well to build trust. And you need to define what trust means, right? For me, trust is being able to work as a unit, is being able to support one another.
count on that.
If someone falls, you pick them up,
Sure.
right? And communication. Now, communication at team level is something. At peer level is something. At executive level is something else completely.
Absolutely.
If you're able, how do you get buy-in? You get buy-in by simplifying, articulating in a very practical way, this plan is going to do this. To do this, we need to do 1, 2, 3, 4. By this date, executives, we want to know type, that's all very
Being
good.
held accountable,
This is the
there's a
budget.
priority,
Now
yeah.
what? You can't create situations where you start a project and it doesn't end for 2 years when you said it would end in 1 year, right?
Sure.
Executives want the results, and they want it to be practical. It's 1 or 0. So it's about being prepared. It's about getting an understanding of all the moving parts.
Yeah.
It's about creating your internal network. It's about targeting who you need to target in terms of communication and building that
Knocking
momentum.
down these projects, finishing them
Exactly.
off completely, A to Z.
And the last part is fear. You should try as best as you can to eliminate fear from your mindset. Because
Sure.
fear creates hesitation, creates doubt. Should I send this email or not?
So fear isn't this might fail, or fear is
Yes,
this is
or even if you have bad news you need to convey to a CEO or to your manager or whatever, just do it.
Sure.
What's the worst that could happen?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that is the major obstacle. That leads to bureaucracy, that leads to hesitation, and that ultimately leads to organizations not being able to take decisions and silos.
And
absolutely. Every company I've been in, and it's normal, and you do a survey, most companies say we want to break down the silos. Easier said than done, right? Yeah, it's a meme. We want to break down the silos. Okay, good luck.
That's great. Well, Karim, you're definitely the right guy to break down those silos. So for sure. And yeah, I totally agree. But when it comes to these larger organizations, and you talk about culture and the mindset, when you have it's hard to break something. There's a saying that I used to hear a lot, like, we've been doing it this way for so long, it's working. Why should we change, right? So I guess you're right. That willing to change, that willing to want to do it, and to finish it. So. Yeah, this is really great, Karim. I want to know, like, what's next for you? Like, what do you work like? Is there any cool projects or initiatives or anything you'd like to share with us, or maybe you just want to highlight a little bit more of some of the past work you're doing. That would be great. So yeah, tell us a little insight. Yeah. Maybe what's next or what you have planned in the future.
No, what's next for now? Obviously, still based in Beirut. I mean, for the foreseeable future, that's the model. In terms of career, it's about continuing to develop myself in my role, building my HR capabilities,
making
obviously within the organization. Obviously, with time, people reach out to you. They need support here, they need support there. So it's kind of building that network eventually. When you hit your 40s or your 50s later on, that could be interesting eventually to relook at your career from a different lens, from a different perspective. But for now, it's just, enjoying the ride.
Steadfast, hold the mission strong.
Doing my to-do lists on the Sundays. Hopefully I'll be able to record a music album this year.
Absolutely.
This is one of the projects I want.
As well, you told us.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
Well, and I heard you sing as well.
I'm gonna be releasing some music. Absolutely.
So we should combine forces. Yeah.
I would love to, honestly. So the last thing too is maybe some closing wisdom, Karim. What could be something you could tell the listeners right now, like maybe someone, they're going through a hard time, right? Or maybe they're interviewing next week for a company and they haven't worked in a while, or just anything you want to leave us with, just as we get get going into the new year. And go ahead.
Find what makes you happy and what you do best, right? I mean, life in Lebanon is tough right now. I mean, there's not a lot of, hope the next couple of years. There's a couple of people who are still up for the fight. I don't mean to sugarcoat anything, but find what you do best, right? Master it to its full extent. Connect with people, LinkedIn, partially can work, but if you have the opportunity to be proactive, to go to events, to just come to BDD, knock on doors, have coffee with people, connect with people who are completely different from you as well, perspective, culture, whatever it is. I mean, focus on one or two things that you believe you'd be good at. Perfect that to the max. You can do it on your own today. I mean, there's a lot for the coders out there. You can learn. I can learn how to code today if I wanted. You too as well. The two things, once you are in a better situation, inshallah, and you are either in a career or you have a job or you're growing in your job, two things I always keep in mind. Don't be too hard on yourself. Okay, don't neglect your family, your wife, your children. Always try to find that balance. And two, don't take yourself too seriously.
Amazing. So we're going to close with that. Thank you guys so much for listening today. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Karim. Honestly, for me, this is something that I'm still exploring, and as we build this movement and this audience, I'm excited to share this. So thank you all very much. We're going to leave. Actually, I'm going to be making an announcement that I've actually given a notebook to Karim. It's by Been There, Done That. They're our sponsor. They're 100% recycled notebooks. Karim has one as well. It's a gift for him for showing up.
Thanks.
Support local farmers, support local makers, and looking forward to launching, to hear you guys on the podcast. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.